as well, to a live stream audience as well. So we'll look at some more Tal games today, being completely unoriginal. There's quite a few. I mean, obviously Tal's one of the most brilliant players ever, so I thought unless anyone has any objections, maybe next week we can look at another player. What are your favourite chess players of all time? I think Tal's one of my favourites, hence a focus recently. But if you let me know your favourites, that'd be interesting as well. So maybe we can change next week, different player. But okay, let's have a look at this game against Lajos Portisch in 1965. There's a slight risk, an increasing risk, we might have accidentally covered some of these games. So if you think the game's familiar, please let me know. Hopefully, I mean, I've checked them and I'm fairly sure that I haven't covered these games before. But the risk is increasing of covering a game I've covered before. Okay, so in Bled 1965, he kicked off with e4, and Lajos Portisch played Caro-Kann c6, and we have here, instead of d4, which is kind of maybe automatic for many players, just to play d4, actually there's this kind of two knights variation. You bring out both knights, knight c3, then you bring out the other knight, so you're not committing to d4. Now, I think one advantage of this approach is, first of all, there's a temptation for black to play d4. And I think in this case you play knight e2, then you play knight g3, then you put your bishop here, and then the light squares might be a bit weaker, especially if black plays e5. So maybe there's a little temptation with this idea that it's sort of like a reverse tango, that you're sort of saying, attack my knight. But black wasn't tempted for that. Lajos played d takes e4, and after knight takes e4 he pins the knight on f3. So we have an annoying pin, and maybe there's some controversy involved in h3, because some of you may think, do you actually want to lose time to play h3 here? But that was decided to be okay to get that light square bishop. So bishop f3, queen f3. So with the light square bishop, you'd expect black to be slightly weaker on the light squares. But black's position might be fairly solid. It depends, can this bishop actually do some damage? Will there be some targets on the light squares later in this game? So knight d7 suffers a slight weakness of the last move. The queen was actually stopping d4, and now Tal pounces on that fact and plays d4. It's been enabled by the weakness of the last move, just blocking that queen from d4. So with a pawn on d4, it's exerting influence in the centre. It can be reinforced maybe with c3. So knight gf6 is now bishop d3. And now knight takes e4. It's as if black was kind of swapping off pieces just routinely. First bishop g4 takes f3. And now this, a knight exchange here. So was black maybe aiming for a draw here? We really need to know like the tournament situation, or if he was just scared of Tal and wanted to get pieces off quickly. So queen takes e4. So we've got a ready-made battery now on that h7 pawn. So black would need to play knight f6 and then castle later if he wanted to castle on the king side. So castles, bishop e7. Okay, and now c3 supporting that d4 pawn. Because knight f6 would unveil an attack on d4, knight f6. But now actually the queen simply parks on h4. So queen h4. And it looks to be a fairly pleasant position for white. But there might be some downsides later. If black strikes with c5 and gives white the isolated queen's pawn, then that pawn will be under frontal pressure. There'll be a nice blockade square potentially on d5. So it's not totally clear. The queen on h4 is also, of course, a tactical target, which is made use of now with knight d5. So where does it go? It goes actually to g4, attacking g7. And now black decides to protect g7 like this, and also putting more pressure on d4. So maybe c5 later is going to be more significant, you'd think. There's d-file pressure, and there might be, pressure down the diagonal. Okay, so rook e1 was played. eyeing e6, of course, but surely a rook sacrifice on e6 is not on the cards at the moment. Queen b6, as though black is preparing to simply castle queenside. And in that event, you know, maybe the queen here can be attacked with h5 and then g5, then g4, and then the white king, Tal's king, will be subject to attack with the black king on c8, seemingly quite safe. So maybe that represents a significant problem that black has not castled yet. There's a forcing move here, though, c4. And it seems to invite a forcing move from the opponent, knight b4. Actually, forcing moves is a subject of debate at the moment, both on my YouTube channel and also in my games. I'm struggling with the concept of how to best make use of it. What was the idea of this forcing move here? You know, was it, you know, because hasn't it just loosened d4? You know, isn't that d4 pawn under fire now? You know, isn't black going to castle queenside and put even more pressure on d4? So what was the benefit of that? Well, there's another very sharp forcing move played now. Rook takes e6, the rook sacrifice, not giving black a chance to castle. So this is the moment where white is pouncing. So the idea may have been, if we look at this c4, may have been with the knight there, it can't go back to e7, so e7 is more vulnerable. So takes queen e6. So there's no knight e7, the knight's over there. King f8, and now forgetting the threat on d3, Tal simply plays bishop f4, threatening the vicious bishop d6 check. So that has to be parried actually, because it would win lots of material. If knight takes d3, then bishop d6, you could win the bishop, the king moves, then you win the queen, you know, like this. Knight takes d3, check, check, and then you could win the queen, you know, check, for example, and there might be even stronger than that. So basically bishop f4, and black seems to be under pressure now after this rook sack. So can black realise the rook, you know, or is he going to get in trouble, even more trouble with his king? He plays rook d8, and now the queen's attacked with c5, but also reinforcing d6 control, supporting bishop d6. So knight d3, offering the queen. The queen doesn't move. Because maybe there's a big problem here, that if the queen uses its only square, it seems, a5. The problem now, maybe, actually there's two problems, not just bishop d6, that isn't a problem, maybe rook d6, but there's a new problem introduced here of bishop c4. How does black defend f7 here? So I think he was forced virtually to sacrifice his queen. After c5, it's quite a dangerous move. It's really, this bishop, you know, is going to come to be a battery on this diagonal. So black sacks the queen. Knight takes d3 is played. Mikhail takes the queen, and now knight takes f4. So it's two pieces there. But remember, black was already a rook up. So two pieces and the rook is a significant material for the queen. Okay. So now queen g4, and black, you know, potentially looked to be okay here, knight d5, but this problem, a pawn now, b takes a7. How is that stopped? The rooks get connected. Okay, sociable rooks talking to each other, stopping the a pawn. What could be a problem here? Now this might be a slightly dodgy combination in this respect, this counter queen sack. Maybe there's a bit of luck involved in the outcome of the game. b4, which potentially threatens maybe to undermine, you know, and maybe, you know, get pressure on c6. What other ideas? Maybe just a4, b5. I'm not totally sure of the idea of b4. Rook goes to stop the a pawn. Now we have check. Okay, now we see an idea of b4, just b5, just trying to undermine this knight really. This knight's a very strong piece. Okay, so rook takes a7, allowing check, and now it's actually a disaster for black. A new disaster has emerged here because Tal plays now rook takes f6, and he's winning a lot of material back because if the pawn or the knight takes, then there'll be queen takes g7, and unfortunately he's just lost the rook. So that was it actually. Rook takes f6, end of game. Oh dear. So I don't know, there's a bit of luck there or something. It's, if we review that game in overview and summary, so there's a point that if you want to play against the Caro-Kann, this knight c3, you're tempting d4 here. That was avoided, and if black wants to try and castle queenside and exchange off pieces, then bishop g4 is getting bits out of the way to potentially castle queenside. d4 was pounced on because the queen wasn't protecting d4. But what Tal got here was potentially an offside attackable queen, because if black had managed to castle queenside, then this might be a tempo gainer for black's own attack. But it never panned out like that because queen g4 was dual purpose, it turned out. Not just attacking g7, but also e6. So maybe the rook sacrifice had been conceived at this stage, you know, move 13, queen g4. So all black wanted to do was just, you know, to have a peaceful life, to castle queenside, then throw the pawns up and slaughter Tal's king. Tal never gave a chance for this concept to be realised here, because he prepared an immediate rook sack. So rook e1, and then we have c4, which carries with it a subtle implication, as we see in retrospect, that the rook sack and c5 will tear apart this diagonal. So rook sack, and now c5 is on the cards for bishop c4, but first bishop d6, which actually stops the black queen coming back to c7. And in fact, with this threat, rook d8 is also stopping the black queen coming back even to d8 now. So both these squares have actually been ruled out for a queen's retreat. It's quite subtle what's happened. So c5 opening that diagonal to prepare queen f7. Hence forcing black to sort of do something desperate, because bishop c4 is virtually, it's not defendable if bishop c4. Or is it? Knight d5? I wonder. Maybe even stronger than bishop c4 is rook e1, actually, because rook e1 would mean bishop d6, rook d6, queen e8. Maybe that's the true intention. Pardon me, rook e1. Does that look stronger to you guys? Rook e1. So knight takes d3, we've got bishop d6 check here. If rook takes d6, queen e8. So rook e1 may be a lot better in this position. Okay, and it's difficult now for black to parry bishop d6. Okay, so it's a tricky game. It's got some intricacies to it. In the game, so black just gave up the queen and didn't last too long, funny enough, even though he had, in theory, you know, material balance here in hand. He doesn't want to disconnect rooks with a move like this, and maybe his king would still be in trouble. But his king was in trouble for this rook takes f6 coming up. So rook e6 and then rook f6. Just winning material. Okay, let's go on to another game. I hope you got something from that game. Any comments or questions on that game? And we'll go on to another game now. Okay, so this is Tal against Larsen in 1965. So e4, and Larsen played the provocative Alekhine defense, and Mikhail, he attacked the knight, which I think, is probably the most important move against the Alekhine defense. I'm not really convinced with other stuff. So e5, and here, I've been playing this trendy knight c3. I'm not really sure about knight c3. I think d4 is correct as well. So you get these two pawns in the center. Let black use the provocation strategy. But now, instead of c4, this is a bit violent and a bit probably giving in to over provocation. There's a solid move, knight f3, which you can simply play now, just keeping a small but solid advantage. So d takes e5. Knight takes e5, which of course rules out bishop g4s for a long time, but the bishop could come to f5. The knight on e5 might be an annoyance for things, like this, for soft spots. e6, and in fact the soft spot f7 is called out now with this next move by Mikhail, queen f3. Doesn't look like a standard move, queen f3, but it's pretty annoying just on the f7. It's pretty direct. So how does black defend this? He doesn't really want to play an ugly looking move like f6. In fact, f6, there might be just queen h5 check here. If g6, then knight g6. So black brings his queen out to f6. He doesn't want to block in the bishop with queen e7 anyway. Then we have queen g3. So we have another parking spot for the queen. Now, in the earlier game, the queen on g4 seemed to be dual purpose for sacking on e6. On g3, there's nothing to sack a rook yet. So what is it doing on g3, the queen? Okay, so h6. How does Mikhail proceed with this kind of offside queen lurking around? Black still hasn't committed to castling kingside. So does this represent a sensible idea to put your queen in advance of black castling? Well, knight c3, and now a computer-like move from black, dynamic sort of out-of-the-box move, moving a piece twice, breaking a sort of fundamental rule. Knight b4, so the knight has intent to exploit c2. It will happily grab the light square bishop if bishop d3. It will snap that up, I guess. Does Mikhail want to give up his light square bishop? I very much doubt it. He plays check, and he puts the bishop over here to protect c2. He solved that tactical issue. The bishop can start be pointing at the soft spots soon after, one would expect. But black is not that keen to castle. If black was that keen to castle now, then bishop e7 would have been played. But no, knight d7 was played, just challenging e5. Okay. Is Mikhail bothered about black taking on e5? He's not. The queen's purpose is actually partly to reinforce e5 anyway on g3. So he's afforded the luxury of just being able to castle here. And black has the option, it would seem, to put more pressure on e5 with bishop d6. But maybe this backfires. Knight takes d7, attacks black's queen. So bishop takes d6, knight takes f6 check. So maybe that's why black just took on e5 simply here. And after d takes, he challenges Mikhail's queen at the expense potentially of his pawn structure. He plays queen g6, positively inviting pawn structural damage. If queen g6 fg, you'd expect this looks a bit ugly. But maybe, dynamically it's not bad for black. If black can play bishop c5 later and maybe castle, then the f file is going to be useful. He could put his knight back to d5, and any knight d5 he'd liberate this bishop on this diagonal anyway. So I don't think this is too bad. Are these weaknesses exploitable? They might not be that easily to exploit. So Mikhail, he avoided the queen exchange. He played queen f3, but you might think this bishop, is it really doing something useful on this diagonal? Isn't this really solid? But on the other hand, look at the black bishop here. It's not that particularly useful, locked in by the e6 pawn. Okay. Again, challenging the queen. Queen f5. Again, Mikhail, he's not keen to trade off queens. He plays queen e2. So bishop e7 signifies black's finally ready to think about castling. So we're like 15 moves in and black still hasn't castled. Okay, so a3, kicking the knight to d5, which seems to be a good square. And all of a sudden, just like in the previous game actually, black's, contemplating a pleasant, easy life. Just a castle, next move, and then later, if bishop b3 especially, just stuff like this. Connect the rooks. Pleasant, easy life. But just one move away from that pleasant, easy life comes this bolt out of the blue now. And you guys on live stream who can't see the score sheet, can you guess, if I give you 10 seconds, what Mikhail played here? So 10 seconds, starting from now. All you guys on the Play Chess server, if you're not looking at the score sheet, guess as well. Sorry, another 10 seconds for everyone to guess. What move did Mikhail play here? Don't look at the score sheet. Anyone? Any guesses? No, not g4 Victor. Not knight takes d5, come on. Anyone on Chess Space server? Anyone want to guess, or you all sting the score sheet? I hope you can cover up the score sheet. We can do these guessing games. I kind of like doing the guessing games on YouTube. G4, maybe okay. Everyone, some people are saying G4 here. Now, what is this G4? Okay, it's a forcing move. As the recent controversial videos about forcing moves show, a forcing move is not necessarily a strong move. One of the intrinsic benefits of a forcing move is a sort of guarantee of the opponent to do something. However, the outcome position might not be favourable. After G4, you've actually done structural damage to your position. You've created holes. You've reduced king safety. So if black's not actually losing or getting mated, even if black was losing a piece, you just damaged your king safety. So a move like queen g6, and then maybe black can even consider h5 and not castle. So it wasn't g4, but that is a forcing move. Well done. It's not knight takes d5. Knight takes d5 is another forcing move, and again you've done damage to your position in another way, because e takes d, and you've solved black's problem piece. The black piece can come up to e6 now. You've solved a major strategic issue. So that forcing move, although a forcing move, is not such a hot move perhaps. I say perhaps because everything needs concrete analysis. What other move would you say? Tal is not just about forcing moves. He's about good moves, which occasionally are forcing. Queen a6. No. This just loses the queen event. It just loses the queen. There's no compensation. Although it's spectacular, it doesn't do anything. At the worst, you get a check in and that's it. Yeah, bishop d7, end of game. So, anyone else? So knight d5. What does Tal play here? Can anyone guess? No? It's outside of your scope, guys, this move. Yeah? Alright, I'll carry on anyway. Okay, so Tal played, in this position, knight b5. Which carries with it a threat of knight c7 check. So it can't just be ignored, or can it? Can black just castle here? That's the question. Can black just castle? If he just castles, what's the problem? What's the problem here, guys? Maybe it's a strategical problem, because knight d6, if black gives up the dark square bishop, you could imagine this is maybe unpleasant, but I'm not really convinced about knight d6. Maybe another idea is simply knight d4, just kicking the queen. Say the queen goes here, maybe f4, and then maybe you've got f5 on the cards. But on the other hand, bishop c5, it's not that convincing. Someone says knight d6. Are you sure? Have you run this through a computer or something? Are you sure the idea is knight d6? So black castles, you'd all think knight d6. Would everyone agree with that? Knight d6 is the idea here. Certainly not knight c7, is it? Because knight takes is covering that. So I would expect it to be knight d6 or knight d4. I prefer knight d4. I don't really know what's going on with knight d6. Knight d4 and then maybe king h1, f4, f5. If the queen moves back, you don't have to be in a rush to play f4. You can play king h1 here. Okay. Right. So in the game though, black didn't want that to happen. He took on b5. So there's some fundamental rules about openings, about not moving pieces too many times, not trying to play too actively without completing your development. Here black hasn't totally completed the development, but has white got bits out of the box here. His rooks are not connected either. So is this a major problem, this position? Why would it be a major problem? Queen takes b5 check. Okay, queen takes b5 check. There's a check, right? The king has got two options. Can't it go to f8? It goes actually to d8 for some strange reason. But why couldn't it have gone to f8? Anyone? Is there a problem with king f8? Mystery. No, it's not mystery. Queen e8 is mate. That's why. Mystery solved. That's a good one, isn't it? Oh, that was a good one. So now we know, look, you can't do king f8, so it has to be king d8. And this doesn't look so hot. So so that was pretty clever. So king d8. So the d file now looks... Actually, this is slaughter time now for the black king, because you didn't really want to play move king d8 with an open, semi-open d file, and you can also kick this knight with c4, which Tal does now, c4. So there's a logic to it. So his knight b5 has all of a sudden transformed the position. Black was just one move away from a peaceful position, and now his king's stuck in the centre on an open d file if he moves the knight. So he doesn't want to move the knight. He takes on e5. And Mikhail, he takes on d5. So he's got his material investment back. Bishop d6 pointing at the king. How does Tal defend? He just plays g3, which also carries with it bishop f4 if needed, to skewer the queen and bishop. So queen takes d5. Avoid the exchange of queens again. Queen e2. So what have we got here? Black is a pawn up, but the king safety is looking nebulous, to say the least, on d8. King e7, and now rook d1. More forcing moves arriving. Queen a5. And now, with the bishop attacked, how do we defend the bishop? Maybe some of us would consider moving the bishop to b3 or c2. Does that look like a reasonable idea? Especially b3. You might be tempted b3. You'd eye e6. But anyway, here actually Mikhail plays queen g4, protecting the bishop like this. Now there's queen f5, harassing the queen again, and the queen dances around, queen c4. And then we've got a queen dance going on here. Attack the queen again. Queen c5, queen d3, queen d5, queen c3, queen e5 coming up. No. Black now attacks the queen with something different. He plays actually bishop e5. Counter-attacking. Now this starts to leave things a bit loose now, because queen e1, retreat but an attacking retreat. Still put pressure on d file, on the e file. Starting to look a bit shakier, the black position. Queen c5. And on c5, of course, we've got the rooks coming in on the c file as well. So bishop d2, preparing bishop b4 immediately to skewer the queen to the king, is a highly unpleasant threat, which has to be dealt with. King f6 is the way the black dealing with it. It looks lost now, the position. It looks as though white's got too much pressure going on here. Attacks the queen. Attacks the queen again. And this time, again, the bishop is not tempted to move back. Instead, Tal again uses the queen to protect the bishop, which has again got the advantage, you know, maybe queen h4 is going to be useful to attack the king. And there's also another unpleasant threat in this position, I believe. Bishop b5, just winning the queen, because where is the queen going? Hasn't got any squares. It's just run out of squares. So b5 is desperate to give the queen a parking spot on b7. And it looks as though bishop c6 is a killer move even in this position. But first, bishop c6 is made even more effective by this next move by Mikhail. f4, kicking the bishop embarrassingly back, where the queen is going to be given less evacuation possibilities. The bishop goes back to b8, and now bishop c6. Sick. He's winning the rook. Even after the queen's exchange, he resigned here. He's winning the rook. Sick. So the game doesn't end with a traditional mate, but rather just brutally winning the rook. Who would have thought? Just wins with material gain. Strange game, this one, against Larsen. So Larsen was one of the best players in the Western world in the 70s. Remember, he played board 1 above Fischer in the 1970 match, 5 years after this game, of USSR versus rest of the world. Bent Larsen. But yeah, he did lose a few times against Mikhail. 1 or 2 times at least. This is one of them. Actually, I'm not sure how many times. But shall we do a quick review and summary of this game? So Alekhine defense, where black was given a really hard time, but there was a lot of queen attacks in this game. A record number of queen attacks. Queen's dancing around endlessly in this game, but this knight b5 shock move kept the black king in the centre, and it started to look kind of dangerous for black. More and more dangerous, really. The danger levels were going up and up until now, you know, white didn't even need to go for the king. He could just win material by force. All right, let's look at another game. Okay. So now you're going to have to excuse me if I hope we haven't covered this game before. I'm hoping. Have we covered this game before? It was an exhibition game in 1969. So Boris Golko famously beat Kasparov, I believe, in one game. And not many people have a good record against Kasparov. I think Boris Golko is one of those people with a good record versus Kasparov. Am I completely mistaking Boris Golko for someone else? I think he's beaten Kasparov anyway. Someone can look that up maybe and correct me. So e4, c5 by Boris. Knight f3. We have a open Sicilian. So e6. So remember, not a6. So a6 has become a lot more popular maybe since 1970 to play a6. So e6 here, you know, allowing this bishop b5 check possibility, but it's not taken up here. White just plays f4, supports the knight, queen f3, now a6. White castles queenside. It looks fairly standard so far. So black is trying to put the brakes on white playing e5. He's putting a lot of pressure on e5. He's preparing maybe traditional bishop b7 along the diagonal. So g4. Now black takes on d4 and plays e5, which seems to sort of question, you know, is Mikhail awake? Did he have his coffee in the morning? Because look, you know, the bishop's attacked and g4. Isn't this like really bad that the bishop and g4 are attacked? Well, actually, Tal shows he's got something really cunning, super cunning here in mind. Well, he just takes d takes, and now he pins that pawn to the queen and puts more pressure on it. So g4 still on and it's taken, but now look, black's position is looking shaky. He still hasn't castled, and now there's an open g file on his king. Even if he did castle, it looks like a disaster already, just in 2 moves. You see, black. You see the problem for black. Do you know what the problem for black here? Black's problem, he was too carried away with forcing moves. This silly, you know, docking computer concept can either win games or lose games horribly. Just because e5 is a forcing move doesn't mean it's good. Because look, strategically, what has happened here? If you castle now, you're just going to get slaughtered on the g file. It's not good. Bishop e2, and black's development is not completed. Okay, what does he play here? Queen a5 to threaten the bishop. Okay. But look at, you know, white's connected the rooks. You know, he's got initiative. Most games by white, you know, are statistically winning in white's favour because of the power of the initiative. E takes d4 and now knight d5. Black's just, you know, under a lot of pressure. And to go pawn grabbing is like simulating an old computer, which is what Boris does now. He goes pawn grabbing, so he hasn't completed his development. So we can say this game is instructive, in inverted commas, because black is breaking all the rules here. He's not developing pieces, putting his king into safety, and he's going to get slaughtered here, which we'd expect. Queen e5, threatening, you know, mate, forget about the king. The king can go to d2. Check, the king goes to d2. Check, b4. Forcing the queen, only one move now to defend against the mate. Queen d8 is forced. Okay, how does Tal continue here? Horrendous position to have from this seemingly clever idea of using some forcing moves there. Rook hg1. Look at the rooks, contrast the rooks here. White's rooks are so much greater. The black king's still stranded in the centre. f6. Disgusting move to have to play. Check. King f8. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. And even this so-called forcing move, seemingly forcing the queen away, is punished spectacularly now with Tal's next move. Can anyone guess it without looking at the score sheet? So 10 seconds to everyone on live stream or ChessBase. So 10 seconds starting from now. What did Tal play now? Event says knight c7. Knight c7 is a forcing move, but it's nothing to do with it's not really a forcing move. If knight c7, you're not even threatening knight e6. The bishop's covering it, so you just take the... queen here, I say quickly, we're checking the checks just in case. No, I don't think that works. It's not knight c7. It's not rook f1. It's not rook f1. Although rook f1 might actually be a strong move. It's a quiet move, isn't it? Very good. It's a quiet move. But no, there's a spectacular move here. I gave you a clue. A spectacular move. Okay, Matt mentioned it on live stream. Rook takes g7. Oh dear, what is this about? The queen is taken. Check. And all of a sudden we reveal that if king g8, then rook g1 looks like slaughter time. So king e8. Double check. Oh, it's the old double check. Oh, that's pretty nasty, these double checks. It's great to get them in your games. You know, great fun to get double checks. So it forces the king to move to f8. Check. And now a quiet move, actually, to finish off. Just rook f7, which simply actually means knight f6 is going to be the killer final mate. Knight f6. So the rook, by coming to f7, is not just threatening rook g7, it's protecting this guy, which means knight f6 and it's you know, it's mate next. So that's pretty horrendous. So that was real punishment. A really punishing game for one or two misplaced forcing moves there. Let's review that again. So Black 40 was being clever here, punishing this pesky looking g4. So just by taking and then e5, you can land yourself in a totally lost position. This game shows. So it's, you know, material grabbing. Then he material grabs on the queen side the completely unimportant a2 pawn. And his king is just ready to be slaughtered now. He doesn't really want to castle into this. Well, there's knight takes e7 anyway. His king can't even castle. So it's ready for slaughter time with a brilliant sacrifice here. Rook takes g7. Okay. There's a question though. What if, you know? What if king takes g7? How would we finish it here? Is it easy to finish this? Do we use check? So let's say king f8. Maybe just queen g3 here to threaten crude. Whoops. To threaten the crude queen g7. I don't think there's any defense here to that. Because the bishop's also like cutting off, you know, the king there. Okay. So that was pretty nasty stuff, that queen sack. Mowing the black king safety down. Okay. So, hope you enjoyed that one. Hope you got something from that one. So let's go on to another game. So this time against Michael Stein. Stein? Do we pronounce it Stein? Wasn't Stein the one Fischer had in Fischer's memorable games when champions meet? Or was that someone else? Am I completely mixing his name up with someone else? When champions meet, Fischer's memorable games? There was this champion Stein. Was it the same one? Okay. So e4, and people, you know, they seem to like the excitement of the games, whether they win or they lose. They still play the Sicilian, just because Tal's got this reputation of seemingly winning, crushing the loads of Sicilian games. They still play it because I guess it's an experience to play Tal in the Sicilian defence. So c5, open Sicilian again. Okay, and now with a6, the more modern move a6. Okay, so bishop g5, e6, f4, and the queen comes to f3 again. So this looks like an aggressive setup, which I think I should use more in my own blitz games. Rather than this sort of new stuff with f3, this idea of f4 and queen f3 seems rather good. So queen c7, again putting the brakes on e5, you know, preparing this b5, bishop b7, maybe. In fact, b5 now, you know, because where else is the bishop going to go? It wants to go on this diagonal, it wants to put pressure on e4. And now, you know, is black going to reach this dream destination of just being able to play bishop b7 with an easy life? No. Guess what Mikhail Tal plays here if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, 10 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds. Oh, by the way, hello, Arconato. A Grandmaster has joined us on Chessbase. Hi there. I don't know if you're a fan of Tal. I suppose have you been through Tal's games? Oh, he's gone. Anyway, okay. Oh, so you guys are guessing bishop takes b5. Yeah, bishop takes b5. And there's a classic Bronstein game actually with bishop takes b5. Bronstein's very creative, dynamic. And to be honest, I was tempted in using this session for some Bronstein games. Can I ask you now, what about next week we check out some Bronstein games? Would that be a good alternative for next week? Because he was very original and creative. And you'll see this bishop takes b5 in one of Bronstein's classic games. Okay. So bishop takes b5. What is the idea of this? It collects pawns, doesn't it? Yeah, so we can do Bronstein next week if that's okay. Any objections to Bronstein, please let me know now. I just think he was original and creative. I saw him in real life in the Lloyds Bet Masters. One of my friends, Paul Georgia, has also beaten Bronstein in the Lloyds Bet Masters, but he was getting on a bit, you know, at that time. So A takes B, and white's collecting pawns. So knight D takes b5, and d6 is now under fire. And also we've still got this threat of e5 attacking f6 and a8 now. So this next move by black seemed logical against e5 to protect the rook. So there's less loose pieces. So surely e5 is not going to be played. No, e5 is played anyway. Actually, if we look at this position and turn on a docking computer, what is a docking computer threat here? Now, to those on Chessbase who might think I'm thinking of a real computer, no, I'm thinking forcing moves and tactical vulnerabilities. Say this fictional move, knight g8, was played, and you were looking for dead forcing moves, even outrageous ones. What one would you spot here? And no, I haven't turned on a computer. I've just spotted it just now. There's a very key killing forcing move here. Can you all guess it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? I believe it's pretty killing anyway. Anyone? Matt, were you looking for forcing moves or did you turn on an engine? When I say docking computer, I don't mean turn on an engine, by the way. I mean looking for forcing moves, yeah? Okay, so queen takes a8. Yeah, this is a pretty forcing move. And this doesn't just win material, Matt. It's mate. Sorry, I was about to sway there. It's mate. Look, the king's cut off. Doesn't just win material. It's mate. That's pretty spectacular forcing move. Queen takes a8. So anyway, so black has to avoid that, of course. So he plays bishop b7. Okay. So surely, you know, black's got a bit of counterplay. He's got, you know, the king's over here. So queen e2. The problem is for black, his king is in the centre still. Look at these pieces, they're not developed. So d takes e5. And now this is tricky. Do you actually want to play fe? You know, the queen's on it. No, you don't. There's another good forcing move here available. Queen c4, because now we're supporting knight c7 check. Black tries to develop bishop c5. Now Mikhail takes on f6. And if the knight takes, then queen takes c5. So g takes. But now, of course, rook takes d7 looks good. But hold on, doesn't black throw in a check? To avoid material loss, black throws in the check and takes on d7. Doesn't matter. Okay, white's material down, but his material is emphasizing things. His material is working like a team. The black king in the center. Check. Okay. Big trouble. Bishop d4. Trying to fend off. And Mikhail tries to open the lines. F takes E. F takes E. And does he want to give up one of his attacking pieces? He would only be left with queen, knight and rook. Black will be a rook up. Doesn't care, he just takes on d4 anyway. He's a rook down, but it's a raging attack. Where's the black king going here? Check. Can it not escape to f6? Well, it can, but check. And now queen e7 threatens both f6 and f7. f5 trying to defend both f6 and f7, shielding the rook against the rook, but losing the e pawn. Check. And now h4, which introduces not just support for queen g5, but maybe more importantly h5 check as well. You know, if takes, you can get the rook into the game. There might be other ideas as well, but maybe queen g5 could be the main idea still, because rook f5 as well, if king f7. We'll see now. Black supports the f5 pawn with rook a5, which seems quite resourceful. Resourcefulness against Mikhail Tal doesn't seem to be enough. You can be ingeniously resourceful in defence. It does seem like an ingenious lateral defence. But now h5 is checked, is used. h5. See, there's another idea. It's not just this idea of rook h1. As soon as king h5 is played, there'll be queen f7. And that happens actually. Now, queen f7 check. King h4, check. 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 We're in a mating there, aren't we? Check. And no, not the blunder, queen h2. Oh dear, that would spoil the masterpiece, because a queen takes h2. Yeah? No. The final move was knight e2. Mate. That's amazing, really. I think. Let's have a look at that again. So again, it looks like to win lots of material, but actually the black king was exposed after bishop takes b5, and it looked to be a fairly standard position, standard looking up till that point. So first the bishop sack, and then sort of a combination to just be a rook, a whole rook down, but the king chase now episode, the king chase, and this ingenious move h4 comes into it here. Now, one question for you guys, you know, what if black had played h5? Can we still slaughter the black king here? I think we can, can't we, with queen g5 check? And then the rook can come in. And it looks as though there's nothing defending the king here. So I don't think this even needs calculation. This looks like it's going to be end of game soon. So it's pretty vicious after this h4. But what if queen d8 then? What if we try queen d8? I think again, you know, maybe h5 check is still dangerous, because again you get this queen f check, and then f5 is also vulnerable here. Maybe the rook takes, and then you're sort of mating. I don't know. So these defensive tries, I don't know if they work. Black just hasn't got enough pieces around the king. Okay, so let's go on to another game. So the game conclusion, just to remind ourselves, was this: the king chased to the first rank to be mated by the knight. Okay, against Chandler, Murray Chandler. Now, Murray Chandler was the guy that killed a lot of fun in the Sicilian, because he wrote a book on the C3 Sicilian. So now this was Naughty Ash 1974. Now I'm a bit concerned. I might have covered this game before, so please excuse the repetition. Okay, so if it is indeed a repetition, so E4 was played. D5, centre counter. Well, that's original. Okay, but doesn't it lose time? Nimzovich hated this opening and gave this opening as an example of losing time. But of course, you've got to factor in how solid the position is. Great, you can lose 10p, but you know there's other factors not in chess. Chess is so complex. Can Black actually get a solid position? So knight c3, queen d8. Okay, it looks, you know, especially dangerous against Mikhail Tal to lose tempo, but okay, it depends, you know, really. Is Black getting a solid position? Now, I think, you know, sometimes bishop f5 is played here, like this Australian GM called Rogers, I think, plays this, you know, with bishop f5. I'm not sure this exact position if bishop f5 is playable here. But e6 looks as though it's a bit timid. It blocks in that bishop. So we're going to get like a bad Caro-Kann. Because if you imagine c6, isn't this the bad Caro-Kann? This bishop should be here. It looks bad already. So knight f3. And it's from these bad, horrendous mistakes that we get these lovely instructive games, which are short and crushing. Okay, so bishop b4. White castles. And now we have knight bd7, queen e2. Black doesn't seem to care about his dark square bishop. He just gives it up, and he doesn't care about this pin with bishop g5. But you know, he has fractured White's pawn structure. Maybe he's thinking, you know, d5 is going to be important. Maybe he's thinking this sort of stuff, and he can try and exert influence on key squares later. So rook e8. But White has a bind on the e5 square. If Black's thinking of liberating with e5, forget it. Knight e5 covers that. And now, after knight f8, this looks really unpleasant. f4. It already looks really unpleasant for Black. But is Black going to be, you know, counter-attacking the centre here? So c5, d4 is supported, rook d1, queen d6, and now a battering ram pawn sack. Well, it's not even a pawn sack, pardon me, it's not even a pawn sack. f5, the pawn cannot be taken because of f7. f7 will be exposed. So knight d5, and in fact the f7 soft spot is picked on now. That's a bit of a clue. So can you spot Mikhail's next move if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Anyone? Can you guess? Looks fairly logical, really. It's not a hard one. It's not f6. It's not f6. Come on. Yes, knight takes f7. There's a lot of agreement about knight f7. It just looks as though it's a flowing attack. You know, it's a nice little double check. You know, it's nice to get the old double checks in. Yeah. King G8. Oh, this is fantastic what happens here, really. This is just gorgeous. You might have thought the other games are gorgeous. I think this is quite attractive as well. E7. And so E7 introduces this pin on the knight. F8 is a big problem with rook F8s pretty soon because the pawn supports rook F8s. So knight E6. D takes C5, putting black in hot water even more because now D5 is under more pressure. But you might ask, well, isn't this check? You know, this check is important surely. Tempo gaining check. No, it's not important. The king just moves to H1 and there's big trouble here. You know, look at this guy. Look at this guy. This is terrible. These knights are on the pinning line of the king. F8 is still a bit of a problem. There were a lot of big problems here. Black's probably totally busted now. He probably busted as soon as knight F7 was played. He plays knight takes C3, seemingly attacking the queen. No need to do anything about that. Rook D8. So threatening an immediate sort of mate actually because the knight's pinned. Threatening rook E8 mate. So that has to be stopped. Bishop D7, stopping, protecting the rook. Protecting the rook. Okay, now I'm going to have to give you a clue actually. Now look, this F8 would be quite juicy potentially, this F8 square to land rook F8. But at the moment the queen's kind of indirectly protecting F8. So that's my little clue for the next 10 seconds I'm going to give you. Can you spot Mikhail's next move here, starting from now? Anyone dare? Okay. Anyone? What did Mikhail play here? Well, he's got to move his... In principle, you'd think he has to move his queen anyway. That's another clue. No, I've given you a clue. It's a queen move. It's a queen move. It's not queen takes E6. Although queen takes E6 looks actually quite attractive. Actually, I think we need to check out queen E6. Let's check out queen E6. That isn't the move, but let's check it out. Queen E6, right? Bishop takes. Say, bishop takes. We're inhibited here from playing rook F8, aren't we? Are we? Rook takes, E takes, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. And black is the exchange up. So I think that answers the question. We are inhibited from playing rook F8 there. Otherwise queen takes E6 would be a neat move. No, actually, shall I tell you? It's not queen E3, it's not queen H5. It's queen E5. Queen E5. The idea is a sort of drag and drop. You know, like drag and drop computers? This expression from my good friend Kostas Karyonis. You want to drag and drop the queen on E5. So you offer your queen to drag and drop the queen. Drag and drop it to E5. So it's dragged and dropped to E5. It's like a drag and drop tactic. Have you heard of that before? It's not really a tactic. It's called decoy or deflection. And I think there's a subtle difference actually between decoy and deflection. Does anyone know what the subtle difference between decoy and deflection is? Because I have forgotten. Does anyone know? What's the difference between a decoy and a deflection? Anyone? There's a subtle difference. Now look it up as your homework for next week and tell me, yeah, the difference between decoy and deflection. I'm just kidding, but it's a sort. You can say it's a magnet. Someone said you can say it's a drag and drop, But the key thing anyway, f8 is more sensitive now, because we already had a pin on that knight, which is also covering f8. So now rook f8, it just wins. Because black can't use the knight, he has to use the rook. And here you don't use the rook, you use the pawn. Mate! I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know about you guys. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah, let's have a look at this game again then. So it was a sweet game. Black played some horrendous moves. This is a bad representation, very bad representation of a centre counter, because I think bishop f5 or bishop g4 even was the right approach. And black gave up the dark square bishop. And just got totally slaughtered. Totally. So this is how to play with the white pieces. This is what should happen when you have the white pieces. That little bit of initiative you get, you just destroy the black king safety with. So knight takes f7. And there's this drag and drop tactic here. Queen e5 coming up. Queen e5. Okay, that was my last sample game for this week. It's 1 hour 6 now. I hope you enjoyed this week. Please check out and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not already a subscriber. YouTube.com King's Crusher. I enjoyed this session, even if none of you did. No, I really did. It was really good, actually. The games open up like a great story. I made a quick note of which games to choose, but actually when going into them, they open up to me as well. It's amazing. I see the details of the stories, as they unfold in much more detail than when I choose them. It's really amazing. So I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, see you next week then. And this will be on YouTube, the video for this, if you want to add your comments. I'll put this on YouTube shortly. I'm going to upload it. So if you check in 2 hours, YouTube.com King's Crusher, this video will be there. Okay. Thanks very much.